Rose and her friend Lena had been sitting in the cafe for over an hour, staring out the window in fear of missing an important moment. They had already drunk 2 cups of coffee each and stuffed themselves with pastries, but nothing was happening on the other side of the glass. Rose decisively broke the silence. "That's enough. I'm tired of staring out the window for nothing. There's no one out there. You must have confused something. My Rick is not like that. After all, we've been together for half our lives. His character isn't a gift, I'll admit, but he's definitely not capable of cheating. Let's leave, or else the other customers will start staring at us." But her restless friend firmly stood her ground. "Just wait another 10 minutes, then we'll go. It's the end of the workday. Our darlings will appear soon," Lena added. That didn't confuse anything. "I've seen your husband with that sly girl at least 3 times. I'm telling you, she's his mistress." "Oh, finally," Lena exclaimed as Rose pressed her face to the glass. Indeed, she saw her husband leaving the office, arm in arm with a young, voluptuous woman. He opened the car door for her and helped her in, exuding happiness and pride at having such a lady by his side. Rose felt a sharp pain in her heart, and she broke into a sweat. She even gasped quietly. Immediately frightened, Lena started waving a napkin at her and brought her water. "Rose, are you feeling ill? Here, take this glass." "Oh, what a fool I am. I meant well, so you'd know the truth." Rose drank the water and sighed heavily. "Don't worry, I'm not feeling bad, just my heart is acting up a bit. It's probably from the coffee. Well, maybe she's not a mistress at all, just a work colleague or an acquaintance. That's it. I'm done with these detective stories. I need to go home, or Rick will come back and I won't have dinner ready." Annoyed, Lena muttered, "Fine if you don't believe it, then don't." Rose began to waver and torment herself. "Well, of course, we've been together for 10 years, and I still haven't been able to get pregnant, no matter how hard I tried. Maybe that's why Rick found himself a girl to have an heir. So what now? How do I go on? I do love him, but what about family?" Seeing the distress on her friend's face, Lena suddenly suggested, "You know what? Your dinner will still be there. There's a reliable fortune teller living nearby. Shall we go see her? Our girls have consulted her many times, and they say she doesn't lie. She'll surely tell you the truth, whether Rick is cheating or not." Rose burst into hysterical laughter. "Lena, we're 30 years old. What are we doing with fortune tellers? This is childish nonsense. I've never believed in this mumbo-jumbo, and I still don't. It's all a bunch of charlatanism, just a way to con people out of their money. But if you want to go, fine. I'll at least have some fun. I'm even curious to see what she'll predict for me. How much does your fortune teller charge for a session?" "Probably a lot, right?" her friend responded. "That's the thing. She doesn't charge anything. You leave something as a token of appreciation." "Fine. Otherwise she won't ask for anything," Rose said, somewhat apprehensive about her future. "What if the fortune teller says something bad? Then I'll be thinking about it and waiting." Rose expected something mystical: candles, semi-darkness, a heavily made-up woman in a black hood, and of course, a deck of tarot cards. That's how she imagined the fortune teller's apartment. When they arrived, a smiling elderly woman opened the door and led them into an ordinary kitchen. Rose was a bit disappointed. The retiree sat her down on a chair, asked no questions, and quietly said, "Let me see your hand. I'll look into what you've brought." She stared at the lines on Rose's hand for a long time, traced them with her finger, and murmured something. Then she suddenly said, "Oh dear, you have quite a complicated fate. Tangled up. Sorrow and joy walk side by side. You've been through many hardships but didn't give up. You held on. You're kind and responsive. Many people take advantage of that. Don't be sad. Don't suffer over your husband. He's not meant for you. You have different paths. You'll find your happiness when you let a stranger, a homeless man, into your home. Today, he is your fate." "Just so you know," Rose smiled, barely holding back her laughter, thanked the old woman, and left the apartment with her friend, thinking to herself, "Good Lord, what utter nonsense. Nothing specific. Anyone could say that and it would fit. How can people believe in such things? It's the 21st century, just a bunch of words." Honestly, in the evening a heavy rain began. Rose was finishing preparing dinner, and Rick still hadn't come home. The woman felt sad and lonely, so she sat by the window, closed her eyes, and seemed to sift through her entire life in fragments. As a child, Rose had been quite a tomboy. Her father worked as a stoker all his life, and her mother was a janitor at her school. They lived poorly, barely making ends meet. The girl only saw chocolate candies on major holidays, and all toys and clothes were already worn by someone else. Her mother was always tired, worn out, with a look of resignation in her eyes. Her father liked to drink, often gave the family a hard time, and was constantly grumbling. As a result, Rose spent most of her time outdoors. She played with the dog and fed all the animals in the yard, for which she often got scolded by her mother. "We don't have money as it is, and you're bringing home the last of the food." Her parents were not particularly eager for Rose to attend the prestigious math-oriented school, as it only admitted very talented or well-off children. Everyone else had new, beautiful backpacks, imported pens, notebooks, phones, and new clothes, while Rose had a patched-up school uniform from someone else's shoulders and awkward, mismatched clothing. Of course, Rose was embarrassed. Her name sounded nice, but her peers did not address her that way. The girl was often teased and bullied, but she was no pushover. Together with her only friend, Charlie, Rose would always get into fights, which the teachers, of course, didn't like. This did not please the teachers, and they reprimanded Rose several times for her inappropriate behavior. However, they appreciated her for something else. The girl had a real talent for arithmetic and mathematics. She could mentally calculate complex combinations and solve any equation, and this was despite the fact that no one specifically tutored her. She wasn't sent to tutors. Rose was always sent to math competitions and Olympiads, where she successfully took first place, thus boosting the school's reputation. As a result, the teachers turned a blind eye to her behavior. Charlie was probably Rose's only friend throughout her school years. He was not stupid, but timid and shy. He had no parents, and he was raised by his only grandmother. Therefore, he understood better than anyone how hard and hurtful it was to be dressed worse than everyone else and not be able to go to the cafeteria with the other kids, having to lie and say, "It's not tasty there," even though his stomach was twisting from hunger. But there wasn't even enough money to buy a roll. Charlie didn't talk much. He just silently sniffled and carried his friend's backpack every year, trying to protect her from the harsh taunts of their classmates. They would jokingly shout, "Oh look, a defender has appeared. Maybe you're in love with Rose," but Charlie would only show them his fist, take his friend's hand, and lead her away. After graduating from school with honors, Rose easily got admitted to the university's economics faculty and graduated with flying colors. She was always sociable, managing to hang out with friends, participate in various activities, and go to parties. She found studying easy and even enjoyable. After university, Rose was hired for a probationary period as an economist at a reputable firm. The girl was overjoyed. She made an effort to understand her work and quickly established herself as a top performer. Young, ambitious manager Rick was the son of wealthy parents and always looked at Rose with a bit of disdain, considering her a young upstart who didn't amount to much. She responded in kind, thinking of him as just the son of wealthy parents. What could you expect from him? There was always tension between them, as if an explosion was imminent. If someone had told Rose back then that Rick would become her husband, she would have just rolled her eyes. But everything changed due to one incident at the company's birthday party. The boss suggested throwing a corporate event in the midst of the party. While Rose was winning one contest after another with her quick wit, Rick sat sulking like a turkey, watching it all. The girl's enthusiasm acted on him like a magnet. He thought about her day and night, getting furious with himself. What do you see in her? She's a redhead, a bit plump, slightly clumsy. So what if she has a beautiful smile and big curled lashes? Nothing special. Acting like she's Einstein, he fumed. Then, during the next contest, they ended up on the same team. Rick was nervous from the start and nearly lost the contest outright. To his surprise, Rose didn't mock him. Instead, she quietly encouraged him. Rick leaned in and whispered, "Thank you," and then unexpectedly kissed her on the cheek. At that moment, something strange happened between them, an attraction. The estrangement and hostility vanished. They went on to dance energetically together to lively music, and it seemed like they couldn't be closer. Thus, their romance began from an ordinary party. It was long and unhurried. The young people had very different personalities. Sometimes Rick was unbearable. He had everything in his life neatly organized, and events had to unfold exactly as he decided. Rose, on the other hand, was easygoing, optimistic, and didn't like arguments, always trying to smooth over conflicts while growing closer to her fiancé. Despite their disagreements, the romance culminated in a lavish wedding 6 months later. Rose couldn't quite explain why she fell for this arrogant rich man, but the fact remained she couldn't imagine her life without Rick by that time. Rose's parents had passed away very quickly and unexpectedly, first her mother, and then a month later her father, who couldn't bear the loneliness. Her mother-in-law and father-in-law were not particularly fond of their daughter-in-law, considering her an unsuitable match for their son. No dowry, no connections, they grumbled. After all, before Rose, Rick had been with Mia, the daughter of a wealthy businessman, but now their son had fallen for this Rose. After the wedding, everyone around began to ask, "When are you having children? Hurry up, don't delay." Rose herself desperately wanted a child, but as the years went by, pregnancy never came. Visits to doctors yielded nothing. The doctors just shrugged, saying there didn't seem to be any particular health issues, but she still couldn't get pregnant. Rick refused to get tested, believing that everything was fine with him. This topic was painful for them, as they were both in their 30s. Friends had children, and not just one. Rose blamed herself, was angry, and couldn't understand why God hadn't sent her the long-awaited baby. She had long stopped being a tomboy. She had become dignified, beautiful, well-groomed, and tried to embody the image of the perfect wife. She took care of herself, dressed modestly but stylishly, with taste. The house was a full cup, although inside she remained completely different. Sometimes she longed to let go and have fun like she did in her childhood, but her husband didn't understand that and would get angry when Rose suddenly started joking or being ironic. One day she bought hot dogs and Coca-Cola, suggesting to Rick that they have a day of treats. Oh, how much she heard for that. Throw that junk in the trash immediately. It's harmful. It's not appropriate for our status. After all, we're not teenagers anymore. Every year, she and Rick grew more distant from each other. An invisible wall seemed to be growing between them, brick by brick. Her husband moved to another company, their schedules didn't match, and they saw each other less often. Now even her friend helped, showing her who her husband was really happy with. What to do? Should she gather the courage and ask Rick directly, "Who is that girl I saw him with?" or should she pretend she knows nothing? Otherwise, a scandal is unavoidable. The woman tortured herself with these questions while Rose pondered on a bench near their house. The twisting gusts of wind were stripping the last leaves from the trees. The woman suddenly felt pity for this stranger. Just out of human kindness, I have everything: a luxurious house, a well-fed life, a good job, and I'm still unhappy. And this poor fellow doesn't even have a roof over his head. How terrifying. The night comes and you have nowhere to go, nothing to eat. In a burst of emotion, she ran out onto the porch and waved to him, inviting him in. She decided that it wouldn't hurt her to feed him, and maybe help him in some way. The man looked at her in surprise but came closer. "The weather is so bad outside," she said. "Come in, wait out the rain. You can have some hot tea and then leave, otherwise you might catch a cold. Let me at least give you an umbrella." The drifter hesitated but still entered and sat on the edge of the hallway ottoman. He took off his hood, and Rose gasped. "Charlie, it can't be. How is this possible?" she exclaimed. "What are you doing here?" He was surprised. "It's me, Rose. Remember, we were in the same class. Don't you recognize me?" He looked at her with clear confusion, as if he were seeing her for the first time. "Rose, I was recently beaten by local vagrants, found on the roadside, and dragged to their shelter. I don't know who you are or where you're from. Are you sure you know me?" At that moment, the door burst open, and a drunken Rick stumbled into the house. Seeing the scruffy-looking man in the hallway, smelling of garbage, he immediately got angry. "So, what's this person doing here?" "Congratulations, dear, we've really hit rock bottom. How long have you been cheating on me with this bum?" "Though I shouldn't be surprised knowing what kind of family you come from." Rose was stunned. "Rick, snap out of it. What are you talking about? Apologize immediately. This is my former classmate. He's in trouble and needs help." He just came in, but her husband acted as if he hadn't heard, standing his ground. "It's clear now who you are. Rose, I didn't expect this. Of course, there's no point in staying here. I'm divorcing you. I've wanted to do it for a long time." Her husband started feverishly throwing things into a suitcase. Rose cried and begged him to come to his senses, but he slammed the door and left angrily. Rose wept and in frustration threw herself at Charlie. "How did you end up in my life? I felt sorry for you, and now I'm left without a husband." "Well, you can warm up, but then you need to leave. My whole life is ruined." She forcibly tried to push the man out the door. To her surprise, Charlie didn't go anywhere but remained sitting on the same bench, hugging his head with his arms and continuing to get soaked in the rain. The woman tried calling her husband, but he ignored her calls. Then the same girl answered the phone with a plaintive voice. "Rick is busy. Don't call here anymore." "Aren't you two separated?" Rose felt bitterly hurt. "What a scoundrel. Not only is he cheating on me, but he made it look like I'm the one who's unfaithful." How cynical. It was completely dark outside, nearly night. Rose instinctively looked out the window, hoping that her husband might have changed his mind and would soon return. To her horror, she saw Charlie still sitting there, wet and shivering. She couldn't bear it, dressed quickly, and approached him resolutely. "I'm sorry, Charlie. You're not to blame for anything. I was just angry and yelled at you." "Let's go inside," she said. He trudged after her, looking dejected and resigned. He wanted to sit down, but suddenly turned pale and began to slowly slide down the wall to the floor. Rose was terrified. She felt his head. It was burning with fever. It was clear that Charlie had a high temperature. With great difficulty, she dragged him onto the couch, stripped off his dirty clothes, brought a basin of warm water, and began to sponge him down. Then she made a compress, changing it every half hour, but his condition kept worsening. He was delirious, tossing about, mumbling curses, and barely coming to his senses. With trembling hands, frightened, Rose called her friend Lena. "Don't ask any questions right now. Go to the pharmacy, get some antipyretics and antibiotics, and come to me quickly. I'll explain everything later." Her friend was stunned when she saw the strange man on the couch. "Oh my God, Rose, who is this? What happened? And where is Rick?" she asked. The woman just waved her hand. "Rick left me, and this is my classmate Charlie. He's in trouble and needs help. There's no time to chat. Help me. You're a medic. He's burning with fever, clearly caught a cold from the rain. Please save him." Her friend, knowing what she was doing, took over administering first aid. She measured Charlie's temperature, was horrified, gave him several injections of medication, and instructed Rose to keep giving him fluids with a spoon. Together with Lena, they spent the whole night by Charlie's bed, taking turns. At one point, they were truly frightened for his life. Despite the treatment, the fever wouldn't go down. Rose held Charlie's hand and in a delirious whisper said, "Don't you dare die. Live, I beg you. God help him. I hope he gets better." Her friend was angry. "I should have listened to you and called an ambulance." "How am I supposed to know?" "No, I'm not an X-ray machine. He might have pneumonia. Who knows? If he dies here, we'll be responsible together." "You really got me into a mess," Rose, as if dealing with Rick wasn't enough. "You decided to take in a vagrant." "Unbelievable." Rose replied softly, "Well, he doesn't have any documents. If they classify him as a vagrant, who will treat and care for him? He's a good person. He protected me from nasty boys all through my childhood. We've been friends for many years. I can't just leave someone in trouble like that. I feel like something terrible has happened to him, but thank God by morning the fever began to subside. Charlie finally fell asleep and started breathing evenly and peacefully. Rose finally exhaled, realizing that the worst was over. Charlie would recover now. Leaning back in the chair, she fell asleep. She didn't hear her friend leave quietly, closing the door. She was sleeping so soundly that, in her sleep, she heard Charlie's faint voice. "Rose, is that you?" She jumped up, ran to the man, and joyfully replied, "Hooray, Charlie, you remembered me. Is your head still hot? Are you feeling better? How do you feel? Is there any pain? Maybe I should still take you to the hospital to see a doctor." He nodded. "Yes, much better, thank you." "No, I don't need to go to the hospital," Rose firmly said. "I'll give you one last injection now, and you'll feel much better." She began to open the ampoule with the antibiotic with trembling hands. Charlie bravely endured the injection and continued, "Can you imagine? I think I remembered everything. It's incredible how things turn out. I went into business after school and gradually grew it. I had a small cargo transportation company with a few vans in the fleet. We traveled around the country. In recent years, things had been running smoothly, regular clients, reliable employees. 3 days ago, I was heading to your city for a meeting with the manager. I needed to sort out some misunderstandings. You know, I never take hitchhikers. Who knows what kind of people they might be? But here was a young couple right at dusk, like lovebirds trying to catch a ride. The girl had a sports duffel bag, so I thought they were probably students heading home. I felt sorry for them and stopped. Well, was it so terrible to give them a lift? Everything seemed normal. We chatted pleasantly as we were approaching the city. Suddenly, the girl asked me to stop, saying she was feeling nauseous and needed to get some fresh air for 5 minutes. So I pulled over to the side of the road. Even then, I suspected nothing. After that, I had a severe headache and memory lapses. It seems the guy hit me on the back of the head with something heavy. He was sitting in the back seat, and I woke up when homeless people had already taken me to a shelter. Thankfully, they didn't leave me freezing in the bushes by the highway. Of course, there was no money, no phone, and no car. I still can't remember anything at all. It's so frightening losing your memory. You wander around the city like an alien, not understanding who you are, where you came from, or where to go. And now I need to go to the police. Of course, the chances of them finding my car are slim. It's probably been dismantled and sold a long time ago, but still. Rose was shocked by what she heard. How awful. Your family must be terrified, searching everywhere for you, running around in a panic. You need to call them and let them know you're alive. Charlie shook his head sadly. There's no one to look for me. My parents passed away a long time ago. You remember I lived with my grandmother while I was in school, and then she was gone. Since then, I've been alone. I never got married, and there are no children. My employees might be wondering why I'm out of touch, but they're used to me being away on business trips. Often the woman asked quietly, "Why didn't you get married? Did you really not fall in love with anyone all these years?" Charlie looked her in the eyes intently and took her hand. "No, I didn't fall in love. I was crazy about you back in school, devotedly carrying your backpack and all. I waited for you to notice that I cared about you, but you didn't. I was just a friend to you. And I was also a fool, too shy to tell you how I felt. No matter how much I tried to start a romance with some girl I liked later on, I always realized it wasn't right. Your red curls, your ringing laughter, your mischievous smile, they're still vivid in my mind." Rose was stunned by what she heard. "Wow, Charlie, I really had no idea. I thought we were just friends and that was it." The man began looking for his belongings. "Thank you. You're my guardian angel. If it hadn't been for your kindness and responsiveness, I'd have been done for. Truly, you and your friend took care of me for so long. It means a lot. Well, I need to go now. I'm sorry for causing the argument with your husband. If you want, I can call him and explain everything, that we just ran into each other by chance and that nothing happened between us. It all seems so ridiculous." The woman shook her head. "No, that's not necessary. I don't want him back. He realized yesterday that nothing happened between us. Besides, he's had a mistress for a long time. I even saw them together. Rick wanted to leave, but he didn't know how. so he found a convenient excuse and turned everything upside down, accusing me of non-existent sins. It's simply this way, Charlie. At first I loved him a lot, and he loved me. I felt it, but as the years passed, we grew further apart. We never had children. We don't have much to divide. This house is in my name, the car, the apartment, and the company shares. Those are his. Let them stay that way. I can't go on living with him after the betrayal. It's disgusting. So Charlie, you're not to blame for anything. I don't blame yourself. I'll tell you more. I'm even glad we met like this. I remember you as a tall, skinny, pimple-faced teenager. Now I see a strong, handsome man in front of me. Yes, I washed your clothes. Here, take them, Charlie laughed. Yes, and you're not the same either. You were a bold-spirited, somewhat plump girl with pigtails, and now you're a real lady. That haircut suits you, and you look amazing beautiful. Well, since you're almost a free woman now, I won't miss this chance. Just so you know, I'll be pursuing you, he winked playfully. Rose was touched. Charlie's compliments and attention were very pleasant to her. She felt like a carefree young girl again. Charlie took his statement to the police, and after 2 weeks, the car was found during a raid in an industrial zone on the outskirts of the city. According to the investigators, the car was being prepared for sale. However, the perpetrators were not found, and the trail had gone cold. But the man was happy to return to his business and immerse himself in work once more. Rose was already waiting for him. Moreover, she didn't expect herself to take such a step. She was quite content with her comfortable, quiet life with her husband, and had a young paramour, Camilla, for excitement. The fact that he left, slamming the door, was just for show. The man wanted his wife to be frightened and beg him to come back. And then this twist. So Rick fumed, got angry, and tormented his wife as much as he could, creating an ugly scene at work while crying his eyes out. But after he cried to his parents, they started calling his wife and trying to reason with him. Charlie did his best to support Rose, just as he had in childhood, protecting her from the hostile, attacking crowd. The girl didn't expect such pressure from all sides. At work, after her husband's outburst, people began to look at her askance, considering her almost a fallen woman who first cheated and then left such a wonderful man. Her mother-in-law urged her to return to the family, hurling accusations. You don't even have children, and you already left our Rick, and now you decided to cheat too. Rick and his new lover, Camilla, were initially thrilled when he arrived at her place one night with a suitcase, saying he had left his wife and that nothing would stop them from being together. Now, Camilla imagined domestic life as follows. The husband earns, spoils her, takes her to resorts while she frequents beauty salons and fashion boutiques to look her best. But after a month of living together, they parted ways in a scandal. Rick yelled that his new partner couldn't cook, didn't listen to his opinions, and was only concerned with herself. Camilla was no pushover either. She hadn't expected her once tender and affectionate lover to turn into such a complainer and bore. Rick had become accustomed over the years to a clean, tidy home, cozy meals, and a patient, loving wife. Now, as a former husband, he abruptly changed his tactics. Still hoping to win Rose back, he loitered outside her workplace with bouquets, apologizing and professing his love. But the woman wouldn't have anything to do with him. She felt comfortable and at ease with Charlie. There was no need to adapt, endure bad moods, or aggressive outbursts. Charlie remained, at heart, that kind, responsive, open boy who had been her protector and guardian throughout her childhood. And now, seeing how his beloved was being attacked, he couldn't stand it. Rose, I've been thinking, why are we shuttling between different cities? Quit everything. Come live with me. You can work as an accountant in my company. We'll get married, and hopefully children will come along. If not, we'll live for each other. I can't promise you the luxurious life you had before, but at least your ex will stop bothering you, and you'll find peace. It's scary to see you lately, dark circles under your eyes. You're stressed and not getting enough sleep. Rose hesitated for a long time. Starting life over at 30 was daunting, but she decided to take the risk and agreed. A year passed after moving to a new city. Rose indeed found peace. The couple married quietly without any grand celebrations. They lived quietly, steadily, and happily. They understood each other with half a word. They could openly share their feelings and be themselves. One day, Charlie came home from work and said mysteriously, "Darling, look who I found right under the wheels of my car." Indeed, it was cute. From under Charlie's coat, a thin, wet gray kitten peered out with suspicion and started sniffing everything around. Rose squealed with joy and threw herself around Charlie's neck. She had always wanted a kitten. Since childhood, she had been feeding all the neighborhood cats. But when she was a child, her mother had refused, saying they were barely managing to get by. Later, Rick was against it. The woman begged him 100 times to get a pet, but he would only grimace in disapproval. Ugh, an animal in the house. That's unsanitary. Just trouble. Fur will be everywhere. No, 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 absolutely not. Are you going to say that we'll be sleeping in the same bed with the cat next? Now her dream had come true. The tiny little one had become part of their family. Rose carefully tipped the kitten in her arms, spoke to him gently, and petted him. She poured him some warm milk. He drank greedily, puffed up like a balloon, and fell asleep on her lap, purring with pleasure. The next day, Rose bathed him, bought him a bowl and a litter box, and got rid of fleas. They named their pet Harry. He was so amusing. He would play for a long time with a piece of paper, a ball, or a candy, tossing it around and chasing it. Charlie made a little house for Harry, and Rose sewed a soft bed. Caring for the new pet brought the couple even closer together. Recently, Rose had been feeling unwell. She had no energy, lost her appetite, and was incredibly sleepy. The woman was even taken to the hospital by ambulance. Her poor husband was beside himself with worry. He tried everything he could think of. Finally, a stern doctor called him in for a serious discussion. "Your wife is pregnant. The term is still short, and there is a risk of miscarriage. You understand her age is not ideal for pregnancy. Her kidneys are weak. Plus, there is a significant risk that the baby might be born with genetic abnormalities. In short, think it over." "But I wouldn't risk her health." An anxious Charlie went into Rose's room. She immediately said, "What did the doctor say?" "He told me the same thing. I don't want to hear it. I've dreamed of having a baby for so many years and thought I was childless. I prayed and cried so much. I even gave up hope and despaired. And now this happiness. It's risky, but I have to at least try to become a mother, even if it costs me my life. It's my choice. I hope you'll support me." Charlie sighed and hugged his wife. "I love you. Everything will be fine. I believe it. And you should believe it too. I don't listen to anyone else. We will have a healthy, strong baby, you'll see." The pregnancy was difficult. Rose was constantly in and out of hospitals. There was always a threat of miscarriage. She didn't make it to full term. And the birth was urgent and premature. But thank God, a beautiful red-haired boy was born. He was so tiny and helpless that it was scary even to hold him. He would amusingly puff out his cheeks and make funny faces. They named their son Samuel because his arrival was a miracle. Charlie was over the moon with happiness. He tenderly bathed him, gave him massages, and sang lullabies. Rose was completely absorbed in family life. When she was feeding Sam, she wanted to shout to the whole world, "Hooray! I'm a mom." Only now did she understand the true purpose of being a woman. It didn't matter what job you had, how much money you made, your social status, or how smart you were. Looking at her son, Rose whispered, "You are my happiness." They decided to baptize the baby, and naturally they chose Lena as the godmother. Rose went to visit her to invite her to the ceremony. Only her best and trusted friend could be entrusted with her treasure. Besides, Lena had extensive experience with children. She had 2 of her own. They sat together in the kitchen over coffee, discussing recent events. Excited Rose shared her emotions. "You know, I'm so happy. I feel so good with Charlie. It seems like I was living someone else's life, not my own. I tried so hard to please Rick, endured his unbearable nature, and kept my opinions to myself. I was always busy preparing fancy dishes for him, abandoned dancing because he didn't like it. I thought that's what an ideal wife should do, and I kept insisting that it was all for the family. But it turns out it can be different. For example, Charlie and I can easily grab some sandwiches and have a picnic right on the lawn, or eat in bed, watch our favorite movies, or go biking in the park on weekends. With Rick, these joys were out of reach. He didn't understand that for him, eating had to be only at the table. Biking was for losers, and going out meant attending glamorous social events. When Charlie brought home the kitten, I almost cried with happiness. You remember, my ex never allowed me to have any pet. And the birth of Sam, I don't even want to talk about it. It's a miracle. Rick and his relatives had long given up on me. They considered me childless. I even started to believe it myself and gave up dreaming about motherhood. And then this happiness. The doctors even doubted that I'd be able to carry the baby, but Charlie believed in me and us, and kept saying that we would have a healthy baby. If someone had told me that my life would change like this, I would never have believed it. Lena laughed. So you still didn't believe it? Didn't the fortune teller tell you the truth back then? Remember her words. The vagabond you let into your home is your destiny. Rose's eyes widened. Oh, you're right. I had forgotten all about that. Listen, let's go see her again. I want to ask her how she knew. How could she predict my fate so accurately? When they arrived at the fortune teller's place, Rose didn't beat around the bush. She asked directly, "Do you remember me? My friend and I came to see you a year ago. You predicted that I would let a stranger into my life, and he would become my destiny. Well, it all came true. Can you believe it? My entire life turned upside down that very day. Thank you. I'm so happy now. But how did you foresee this?" The old woman smiled. "I could just see from your eyes that you were unhappy, that you were confused and afraid to take a step and change something. So I gave you a nudge to stop dwelling on it and let change into your life, that's all. You did everything yourself. I had nothing to do with it." Rose couldn't believe it. It seemed like some kind of magic or enchantment, or maybe it was just fate. Who knows? Every time she walked with Charlie and their son in the park with the stroller, she remembered the fortune teller who had told her money single pull around with a single phrase. After that, how could she not believe in predictions?